Gilligan, just one name, no last name needed, no introduction required. The moment you hear it, something shifts in your memory. A white sailor's hat tilted sideways, a red shirt tucked into white pants, and the most lovable, catastrophically unlucky man ever stranded on a deserted island. For millions of people who grew up watching American television, Gilligan was not just a fictional character. He was a friend, a familiar, foolish, deeply endearing friend who somehow made getting hopelessly lost feel like the greatest adventure imaginable. It has been 62 years since Gilligan first stumbled onto that island. 62 years since the SS Minnow sailed out of a Hawaiian harbor on what was supposed to be a simple 3-hour tour and never returned. 62 years since 7 very different strangers became, against all odds, a family. And yet, here we are, still talking about them, still remembering them, still smiling at the mention of coconut radios, bamboo furniture, professor who could apparently build anything in the world except a functioning boat. The skipper, big, broad-shouldered, and loud enough to rattle the palm trees, the skipper was the beating heart of the island's small community. Jonas Grumby, that was his real name, though almost nobody ever used it, was the man everyone instinctively turned to when something went wrong, which, on that island, was approximately every single day. He was the authority figure, the protector, the man with the plan, even when the plan made absolutely no sense. And through it all, he never stopped caring about his little buddy. That relationship between the skipper and Gilligan was one of television's great comic partnerships. 2 men who drove each other absolutely crazy and would have done anything for each other. Alan Hale, Jr., the actor who gave the skipper his enormous, generous spirit, was a man who understood loyalty deeply. He spent his later years visiting seriously ill children in hospitals, still wearing that captain's hat, still bringing the skipper back to life for kids who needed a reason to laugh. He passed away in January of 1990, taken by a rare cancer at the age of 68. The island lost its captain. Television lost a genuinely kind man. Thurston Howell III. Say that name slowly, and you can almost hear the accent. That magnificent, exaggerated, utterly ridiculous, aristocratic drawl that made audiences howl with laughter for 3 full seasons. Thurston Howell III was absurd in the most deliberate and brilliant way. A man of almost incomprehensible wealth, suddenly stripped of every luxury and comfort he had ever known, yet somehow still behaving as though the island owed him a butler and a private dining room. He was the joke, but he was also in on the joke, and that made all the difference. Jim Backus brought extraordinary warmth to that role, layering real affection beneath all the pomposity. His personal life was, by Hollywood standards, remarkably stable. He and his wife Henny remained together for over 40 years, writing books together, supporting each other completely, building a life that was quieter and more genuine than any mansion his character ever owned. Jim Backus passed in July of 1989, after years battling Parkinson's disease, leaving behind a legacy of laughter that still echoes. Lovey Howell. Where Thurston blustered, Lovey glided. She was elegant, sharp-tongued, and absolutely magnificent in her complete refusal to acknowledge that anything had gone wrong. Stranded on a deserted island with no staff, no wardrobe, and no social calendar. Simply unacceptable. Natalie Schafer played Lovey with a dry, refined comic intelligence that made her scenes some of the most quietly brilliant in the entire series. She was 64 years old when the show began, which makes what she achieved on screen even more remarkable. In private, Natalie Schafer was a woman of deep generosity and deep reserve. She donated between $1 and $2 million to an actor's retirement home, an act of extraordinary compassion that she never publicized. She kept her illnesses private, her struggles private, and her finances carefully managed through decades of smart real estate investments. She passed away in April of 1991 at the age of 90, gracefully and on her own terms, which is precisely how she would have wanted it. The professor, Roy Hinckley was the voice of reason on an island that desperately needed one. Calm, methodical, endlessly patient, and possessed of a scientific knowledge so vast and versatile that he became the group's unofficial engineer, doctor, meteorologist, and problem solver all at once. The running joke, of course, was that with all that brilliance, nobody ever managed to actually leave. But audiences never held it against him. The professor was too likable to blame for anything. Russell Johnson, who brought that quiet intelligence to life, carried a private grief that most of his fans never knew about. His son David died from AIDS in 1994 at just 39 years old. After that loss, Johnson withdrew from public life almost entirely, living out his final years in seclusion on the Washington coast, surrounded by the sound of water and the weight of memory. He passed away in January of 2014 at 89 years old. The island had lost its wisest voice. Mary Ann Summers, sweet, practical, grounded, and genuinely good in a way that never felt forced or false. Mary Ann was the girl who actually kept the island running while everyone else was busy having a crisis. She grew the food, she cooked the meals, she kept people's spirits up when everything seemed hopeless, and she did all of it without complaint and without needing to be noticed. Generations of viewers chose Mary Ann over Ginger, not because Ginger wasn't glamorous, but because Mary Ann felt real. She felt like someone you actually knew. Dawn Wells gave Mary Ann a warmth and authenticity that was entirely her own. Off-screen, she was a woman of genuine compassion who founded arts programs and educational initiatives and gave generously of her time even when times were hard. Her final years were marked by financial difficulty, health struggles, and ultimately the cruelty of a pandemic that took so many. She passed on December 30th, 2020, from complications of COVID-19 at the age of 82. She deserved so much more comfort than her final chapter gave her. Ginger Grant, the movie star, the glamour, the woman who somehow had a different sequined gown for every day on an island with no electricity and no luggage. Ginger was the fantasy, the Hollywood dream made flesh, and she played it with such knowing, sparkling humor that she became something more than a simple sex symbol. She was funny, genuinely, intelligently funny, and the actress behind her was funnier and sharper still. Tina Louise is today the last surviving member of the original main cast. She is in her early 90s, living quietly in New York, writing books for children, advocating for literacy, and living a life defined entirely on her own terms rather than anyone else's. For decades, she resisted the typecasting that the role of Ginger threatened to lock her into forever. She fought for complexity, for range, for the right to be seen as more than a beautiful face in a glamorous dress. She won that fight. Her survival is itself a kind of victory. 62 years. Think about what that number actually means. Entire generations have been born, grown up, had children of their own, and passed that same show down like an inheritance. The world of 1964 is almost unrecognizable from the world we live in today. And yet, those 7 people on that little island still feel familiar, still feel close. Maybe that is the real secret of Gilligan's Island. It was never truly about being stranded. It was about being together, about finding your people in the most unlikely of places and making something warm and lasting out of nothing but time, effort, and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. The SS Minnow never made it home. But 62 years later, somehow, neither have we. And perhaps that is perfectly fine.